Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. This is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast and brought to you by PropSwap, America's sports betting marketplace. Buy and sell your sports bets. Find out how at PropSwap.com or download the PropSwap app today. Got the Masters coming up. It's a perfect time to use PropSwap. And I think many of you should try it out if you haven't done it before. You know, you go out there, you buy Jordan Spieth. You know, Spieth started at 60-1. He's now 10-1. If you would have bought that ticket at 60-1, you could sell that at PropSwap and have 60-1 odds to sell to another bettor. That's how PropSwap works. And they bring you Football at 4 today on the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN. Andrew DiCecco, Inside the Birds, and, of course, the Eagles at 12, the NFL Draft coming into fruition. And let's bring in Andrew DiCecco here on the Sports Bash Boardwalk Honda Hotline. What's going on, Andrew?
Hey, Mike, I'm doing well, man. A few weeks out from the draft, so I expect to see a lot of news coming out.
Yes. Do you anticipate that number 4 pick being made by the Atlanta Falcons or somebody else?
I think the Falcons, they need another quarterback. I think that a weapon like a Kyle Pitts could be in play for them. So I think they're going to stand firm and probably make that selection.
So when they say the door is open for business at number 4, you think they're taking calls, but in the end, they won't be blown away enough to pull the trigger.
Yeah, I think they're certainly going to take calls and entertain it, but they're going to probably want a king's ransom for that. And knowing where they're at and that they're more than a few pieces away from being a significant contender for anything, I think that they should just kind of stand pat, take the best player available, and start to build their franchise up that way.
All right. I'm going to get your opinion on the trade that happened and what it means for Philadelphia now at number 12. When Sam Darnold gets traded and he's now on Carolina at number 8, what does that do to a team like Philly at number 12? Your opinion?
Well, and if you remember on the show, I mentioned that I thought that the Panthers would have been in serious play to take the quarterback, and obviously now they're going to probably look for a skill player to build around Sam Darnold, and they got a great value for Sam Darnold. He's only 23 years old. A lot of people forget that. You feel like he's been around forever, but Mac Jones is just 22 years old, for example. So I mean, if Joe Brady can get the most out of Sam Darnold, expect Joe Brady to be a head coach by next season. I mean, there's Sam Darnold's got to stay healthy and everything like that, but I think that there is some potential there. I do think he's a good quarterback, and I think it'll take the right coach and the right system to really bring that out of him. He's also reunited with Robbie Anderson again, so that'll be something to watch for. But I think it certainly takes they're going to go with the skill player, so it's going to knock down the Eagles a little bit. And I do think that someone like a J.C. Horn will probably be around still. I don't think it'll affect them in that area. But any hopes that they had of maybe a Jalen Waddle or something like that, it's a little murkier now.
All right, I want to throw this by you then, this scenario. What if one of those 4 quarterbacks, or I guess 5, but the 4th of those quarterbacks, if he's on the board at number 8, does Carolina say too good to pass up, still got to do it?
It depends on how much they really like the player versus the skill player that could be available to start to build that around. Because obviously they like Sam Darnold enough to at least bring him in there and give him a shot, and they could always have that opportunity next year depending on how they feel about the quarterback class. I think it would be in their best interest. They need to really retool their entire defense. You're going to get an opportunity to take a Patrick Surtain or something like that there. You're going to have a chance to, if you want to add a receiver, there's going to be a Jalen Waddle there. They're going to have a whole bunch of opportunities to really add to their team. And I think if you're Matt Rule, it makes sense just to go offense or defense, but don't necessarily go on the route of a quarterback again.
You know, I want to get your opinion on this. I got into a conversation with a buddy of mine, and most people that I've talked to or heard have Penei Sewell as the top tackle in this draft. Now, he says Slater's the better player, and I said I haven't heard one person tell me Slater's the better player. But after watching a little bit and talking a little bit, Penei Sewell might be the better tackle, but is Slater a better fit for a team like Philly, who you have a versatile player who could play up and down the line, where Sewell, you're probably using him at left tackle?
Yeah, well, that's sort of interesting. I hadn't heard anyone say that Slater was better, but because I consider Sewell to be one of the premier players in this class, the top 3 talent. But I mean, you can be a jack of all trades, but a master at none. I mean, or you can get somebody that's very proficient in a certain area that's going to be a stalwart left tackle for your franchise for the next 10 to 12 years. That's not to say that Slater's an average player or anything like that. It's just saying that, he can do a lot of different things, but where is he ultimately going to settle at the next level? I mean, I personally think he could be a right tackle, he could be a guard, but is he going to be that dominant all-pro that a Penei Sewell is going to be? I don't see that.
Right, so essentially Slater might be the more versatile of the two guys, but Sewell is probably the guy who's more of a cornerstone franchise left tackle. And you mentioned Slater, more of an inside guy, maybe a right tackle at the pro level, right?
Yeah, that's how I view it, yeah.
All right, so I want to go and take a look at corner. Now, okay, let me ask you this. Eagles are at 12, right? If this player starts to fall and he's at 8-9, because see if you agree with me here. You're not trading with 10 and 11, Dallas and New York. They're not making a deal with you to change places with them. So it's going to be tough for the Eagles if they see a player falling, because 10 and 11, do you agree, are out of play?
Yeah, I don't think that there's going to be any wiggle room there. So they may have to vault past that if there's a player that they really like, such as the Jalen Waddle, who I think would be a good fit here in Philadelphia, maybe a Devontae Smith, depending on how high they are on him. I don't think Kyle Pitts will necessarily be even in that range. He could go as high as 4 to Atlanta. But yeah, I mean that's the type of player you're going to be looking at. I mean,
all right. Well, let me ask you,
one of the Alabama receivers, possibly.
Then let me ask you this: if this player starts to fall, let's say he's at 7, he's at 8, what player is that Philly says, that's the guy we got to jump over New York and Dallas to go get?
Well, I would say one of the Alabama receivers. I don't think Jamar Chase is going to slide that far. I don't think Kyle Pitts is going to slide that far. I don't think Penei Sewell is going to go past 3. So I mean, those are depending on if they're set on adding a wide receiver to the offense and changing the whole dynamic, and they really are enamored with those 2 players, one of the 2. I could certainly see those guys being in play, but it also makes the most sense for me if you're the Eagles. Stay there at 12. You're going to get a top corner that's going to be available. You're going to have you may have one of those receivers that slides there. I mean, you're going to be able to maybe a defensive end and Russo or Kwity Paye, and then they have so many other areas of need that you can't really go wrong. They just have to take the top player available.
Andrew, why are people seemingly unexcited about the pass rushers? Mosher yesterday talked about it. Can't remember a draft where an edge rusher, pass rusher wasn't in the top 10, and yet it seems that no one is excited if you get the best pass rusher in this draft.
Yeah, well, there's question marks with all of them, Mike, or at least the premier ones. I would say Russo, he has the size, but he's incredibly slender, and he needs to add a lot of muscle and bulk to his frame. He only had 1 year production. You're kind of basing everything off of that. He's not very technically savvy yet. There's a lot of potential there, and he has a very high ceiling, but he's more of a projection. So it's kind of hard to make that kind of investment in alignment at that when you're talking about that type of draft capital. And with Kwity Paye, his production, Michigan had a lot of dynamic players on their defense, so he never really had a chance to stand out until recently. So there's not a whole lot of production to go off of for him. And he's another one that can play inside or he can play outside, but he's not necessarily dominant in either aspect. So yes, he's going to likely be a starter, a long-term starter at the next level, but there's not those dominant traits that you look for when you're assessing those top-end pass rushers.
All right, Andrew DiCecco is with us here on the Sports Bash. Now, about a week ago, I told you there was a mock draft that had Mac Jones going number 3. Do you remember that? I'll play your reaction for you. Ready? Mac Jones 3.
Whoa.
Now, that was you a week ago. Are you now coming to terms with the fact that he is, in fact, going to go 3?
I'll believe it when I see it. It's the draft goes a million different directions, and a lot of things happen that nobody really sees coming. So I have to really, that one's really hard to wrap my head around, to be quite frank with you. But I mean, sure, I guess. I don't. If they're wrong, I mean, it's going to set him back a number of years, and I'm not particularly high on his prospects for whatever that's worth. But I mean, I consider him more of a mid to late first round talent.
Well, I value your draft. I value your draft knowledge as one of all the guys I've talked to on this show over the years. You've got a wealth of depth of draft knowledge, unlike many that I've had. I mean, so I definitely – now, yesterday we had Mike Tannenbaum on, okay? Now,
cool.
He did a GM mock draft. In other words, if he was the GM of that team, this is the guy he would take in that spot. So I want to kind of play that out for you, and I want to tell you who the Eagles landed. Did you see this mock draft?
No, to be honest, I don't read any mock drafts out there.
Okay. So this is good because I want to hear your reaction because you might be surprised with who is there at number 12. All right. Trevor Lawrence 1, Zach Wilson 2, Mac Jones 3. All right?
Mm-hmm.
Trey Lance 4 to Atlanta. See that happening?
It's possible. I mean, but Atlanta needs help in a lot of areas, so that might be a little high for Trey Lance. I consider him a top 8 to 10 guy.
All right.
Going around there.
Penei Sewell 5 to Cincinnati. Jamar Chase. Go ahead. What's that?
That'd be good value for Cincinnati.
I think that's a great. I think if Cincinnati does that, that's finally the first time they make a. They got Burrow last year and this. Cincinnati, they want to take a receiver so bad. They want a Cincinnati it so bad. But Sewell's the guy in that spot. He's got Chase 6 to the Dolphins. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Waddle 7 to Detroit. Justin Fields 8 to Carolina. He still feels like Carolina should take a quarterback because of Darnold's contract situation.
Okay.
All right. 9. Micah Parsons, Denver. There's a name you haven't heard yet that you're probably scratching your head about, I'm sure. Patrick Surtain, 10 to the Dallas Cowboys. Number 11, the Giants, Azeez Ojulari, outside linebacker. What do you think about that?
That's one of those picks that you would typically see in a draft that no one sees coming, kind of like Titus Howard a few years ago, going in the late first round, that sort of catches everybody by surprise. I don't necessarily view that the same way, but I mean, the crazier things have happened.
Yeah, I always feel like there's somebody in that top 12 that you're like, whoa.
It happens every year, Mike. So, I mean, that very well could be one of the fastballs that are thrown.
And number 12, Philadelphia, Kyle Pitts.
Well, it's an interesting journey for the Eagles to kind of to have Pitts fall to them. I mean, a lot would have to happen, obviously, for that to really transpire. So, such as some of the curveballs that were thrown into that first round mock.
It's really what? It's really the Carolina 8 where he takes the quarterback. That's one of them, right?
Yeah, that's definitely that threw a wrench into everything. But I do think that now that they have their quarterback, I think that they could at least start to address other areas. At least that's what I would do.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to revisit that next year, you'll probably have that opportunity.
Yeah.
That's also coming from me, who I actually do think Sam Darnold has some potential. So it wouldn't make a lot of sense in my view to go and get another young quarterback.
Well,
Sam Darnold's still 23 years old with a lot of potential.
Just to throw some other right after Philly, Christian Darrisaw to the Chargers, Kwity Paye to the Vikings, Devonta Smith to Alabama, to New England. J.C. Horn, 16 to Arizona. If Arizona gets J.C. Horn at 16, they're going to do backflips. The Raiders getting Rashawn Slater at 17, and Vera Tucker going 18 to the Miami Dolphins. So there's some players all the way down to 18 that we've seen in the top 12 in some areas, going all the way down to 18 in this particular. So do you think there are 18 and then there's a drop-off, or where's your drop-off?
My drop-off is at least around probably 12, right? Right where the Eagles pick, I think they're right on the cusp there. And then I think there's a significant drop-off in talent as far as guys being able to be plug-and-play, early contributors, cornerstone prospects. And that's honestly why I don't put a whole bunch of stock into mock drafts. I don't really read a bunch of them. I kind of base it off of my own opinions, my own big boards, and because all this is a projection, it's a fun exercise to do.
Absolutely.
But it rarely does it ever come to fruition. So, But it is interesting to kind of fathom.
Oh, yeah. And look, to get a perspective from a guy who was in the draft room making that pick, and I asked him yesterday, Andrew, how prevalent is it, the information for next year's draft when making a pick this year? In other words, this year's draft is loaded in wideouts. Now, I don't know what next year's wideouts look like, but does Mike Tannenbaum, GM of the Jets, know? And he says, absolutely, and that could help break a tie. In other words, you have two guys neck and neck on your board. Next year's wide receiver class is weak. This one's strong. We'll take the guy now, knowing that next year it's going to be harder to get one.
Yeah, but there's always, that's a smart approach to have. Obviously, he would know. But then there's also how do you know? How do you plan that far in advance? There's always guys that come out of nowhere. You look at Zach Wilson this year, and the quarterback, and Devontae Smith just had completely took the college football world by storm and really vaulted his draft stock. This type of stuff happens all the time. So who's to say that there isn't going to be another player who emerges and all of a sudden you're like, that guy would be a really good fit. He's got the height, weight, speed, ratio, and we really need that extra. So, there's a lot of different things that are at play, and then all of a sudden you're like, maybe a year ago we didn't feel this way, but now we really realize we need to address this area. So, it's one way to look at it, but then there's also, I'd say, how do you plan that far in advance? You have to sort of let things unfold.
It was a fascinating to hear from a guy. This guy who made picks. He was the GM. He sat in that room. I thought it was pretty interesting. Tomorrow, Andrew's back, and he has his mock draft 2.0 for the Eagles. So we will take a look at the 11 players he thinks the Eagles might end up with. So we'll kind of break down his second mock draft. We'll talk more about the draft as the draft is getting closer. The fact that this number 4 pick could be in play, that adds intrigue. Here's a question for you real quick. I got about a minute. Mm-hmm. Let's say Atlanta doesn't take a quarterback. Is there another team in the top 12 that would take that 4th quarterback?
Yeah,
So you're talking about a quarterback for the 4th and 5th one. They could potentially, I guess, fall. I guess that's where you would start to. Is that a good thing or a bad thing then if you're Philly and 2 quarterbacks are still lingering out there past the 4th pick? Because you know that Carolina, Cincinnati's not taking one. You would imagine that Miami's not going to take one.
You could see a trade up, possibly. The Patriots would be a team that really might look to upgrade from Cam Newton and Jarrett Stidham. And I don't know.
I think that everybody keeps pointing. And then Denver at 9. If there's a quarterback on the board for Denver, do they take one?
I think that certainly becomes a possibility and a scenario that becomes increasingly likely. They really need to land that quarterback. They need to get that right.
Yeah.
I'm not sold on Drew Lock at all. I initially was, but he really has not been able to put it together or find any sort of consistency with good pieces around him.
I feel like we could get a couple of real tasty IPAs and just sit around outside on an April Saturday afternoon and throw every scenario of the book at each other, man. I love this kind of conversation.
Yeah, me too, man. And maybe we can make that happen. one of these days.
Soon enough, Andrew DiCecco, the draft will be here, and he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. He's back tomorrow. We're going to look at his Eagles-only mock draft and more draft fastballs I'll throw at him. Maybe a change-up here, a little curveball. And Andrew will answer all my questions coming up on Football at 4. Thanks, man.
You got it, man. Talk to you tomorrow.
All right, he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Andrew DiCecco here on the Sports Bash. Always love talking draft with him. I literally feel like we could just throw draft questions back and forth at each other and just go, how about this scenario? What about that scenario? I know he loves it. If he could pick something to do other than what he's doing right now, no, I think he'd rather be in a front office and scout talent. I mean, that's the guy who loves Senior Bowl, Shrine Bowl, small colleges, finding the uncovered gems. He really should be a draft analyst is what he should do in life. Shouldn't be working with me.